Imagine stepping outside on the coldest night you've ever experienced. Not just a chill that makes your nose run or your fingers numb, but a bone-deep, frostbite-inducing, breath-freezing kind of cold. Picture the wind slicing through your jacket like it's made of paper, the temperature plunging well past minus 30 degrees F, and you're miles from the nearest heated building, with nothing but the stars and snow around. Now, what if I told you that thousands of years ago, Vikings faced that hellish cold every single day, winter after winter, and not only survived but thrived? Sounds impossible, right? How did these long-dead Scandinavian warriors manage to conquer such brutal conditions without the luxury of modern heat tech, insulated fabrics, or electric blankets? Well, buckle up, because Vikings actually had better tools for survival than we do today. And yes, I mean better, not just sturdy, but genuinely superior, in ways modern science is only now beginning to understand. So let's dive into the frosty mystery and uncover the secret Viking survival hacks that would make your high-end outdoor gear look like a wet rag in comparison. You might expect ancient warriors to be wrapped in little more than animal skins and luck, right? But here's the twist. This might be the strangest Viking survival trick you've never heard of. Something so counterintuitive, so ingenious. It flips everything we think about cold weather gear on its head. Imagine using not just animal pelts, but materials and techniques that created what scientists today call a thermal microenvironment. So effective it worked like a 1,000-watt heater strapped to your body. Picture Vikings wrapping themselves not in bulky layers, but in what you could think of as the medieval version of high-tech Gore-Tex, clothing that breathed when you moved but locked in brutal heat when you stood still. This wasn't primitive clothing. It was the cutting edge of cold defense, crafted from meticulous knowledge of materials, biology, and weather, all passed down through generations like a sacred secret. But what exactly did they do? How did they innovate without electric innovation? First up is one of the most remarkable things the Vikings did to battle the cold. They crafted clothing from not just any animal fur, but from carefully selected pelts layered in a way that maximized insulation without sacrificing movement. Here's the deal. Fur works by trapping air close to your skin, and trapped air is your best friend on a freezing night. But the Vikings didn't settle for just any fur. They preferred pelts from Arctic foxes, otters, and even beavers. Why? Because those furs have hollow guard hairs, a natural insulation technology. Hollow hairs trap 6 times more air than regular fur, making it an ancient form of what scientists call nature's balloon insulation. To put it into modern terms, imagine wrapping yourself in a living, breathing 2-inch thick layer of bubble wrap that can keep you warm even when the temperature drops below minus 40 degrees F. That's better than most synthetic outdoor gear you find on store shelves today. But it wasn't just the type of fur. They also mastered layering like pros. Not just throwing on multiple pelts at random, Vikings used combinations of soft underfur closest to the skin and tougher guard hair pelts on the outside. The underfur is similar to what's now used in high-end thermal underwear. It's soft, dense, and traps heat next to the body. On top of that, the shiny, oily guard hairs act like a windbreaker, repelling water and icy wind. This layering system is pretty much the origin story of modern-day base layers combined with windproof jackets. Think of it as the ancient equivalent of a 3-layer outdoor gear system. Wicking, insulating, and protecting all rolled into one. So when a Viking ventured out into the icy fjords or treacherous winter forests, they were effectively wearing a carefully engineered cold weather suit. But hold on, because warmth isn't just about clothes. Vikings had another ace up their sleeve: footwear designed specifically for Arctic conditions, which is no small feat considering the numb, frostbite-prone extremities are often the first to go in the cold. They made shoes and boots called nailins, carved from birch bark layered with reindeer fur. Birch bark might sound like an odd shoe material, but it's actually incredibly waterproof and surprisingly insulating when layered properly. Add the dense fur lining, and you have a natural thermal barrier that kept the Vikings' feet just above freezing even when they were standing for hours in snowdrifts or frozen rivers. In modern terms, this is like the Viking version of insulated rubber boots, but way more breathable and lightweight. They kept your feet dry, warm, and agile in an environment where a wrong step might mean losing a toe. And don't forget how that Birkenstock-like lightweight design helped prevent sweating. Because here's the thing, sweating is the enemy of staying warm. Moisture clinging to skin leads to rapid heat loss and hypothermia in mere minutes. The Vikings figured this out long before science caught on. Their footwear's breathability stopped moisture buildup, so they avoided the chilling effects of wet feet. It's like wearing nature's version of Gore-Tex boots combined with modern breathable wool socks. This is seriously impressive engineering when you remember they had no synthetic fabrics to work with, just natural materials, ingenuity, and some good old Viking grit. Now, while fur and boots help trap warmth, Vikings also tackled the deadly cold from the inside out through their diets. What you ate was as crucial as how you dressed, especially in freezing climates. They had a high-fat diet, with up to 70–75% of their daily intake coming from fatty fish, seal blubber, and other high-calorie foods. This wasn't just to bulk them up. Fatty acids in their diet actually helped insulate their bodies internally by boosting brown fat activity, a type of fat that burns calories to generate heat rather than store energy. It's what scientists today call metabolic heating, a natural internal furnace. Eating like this gave Vikings the energy to maintain core body temperatures in sub-zero weather, providing continuous internal warmth while their outer layers kept the cold at bay. So in a way, Vikings supplemented their personal heating system with a nutritional strategy that's the metabolic equivalent of plugging yourself into a slow-burning, fat-fueled space heater. And speaking of space heaters, here's another crazy trick. Vikings used hot stones wrapped in cloth, basically primitive hot water bottles, inside their beds and sleeping quarters to keep warm during the frigid nights. Before you imagine a sweaty stone in your sleeping bag, think instead about how these stones radiated steady heat for hours, warming up the stone bedrock and surrounding air in small, tightly enclosed Viking huts. With walls insulated by turf and wood, these heat sources created a small thermal oasis, raising the ambient temperature enough to make sleep survivable in freezing conditions. It's similar to placing a heating pad under your mattress, except without the electricity and with a stone that can stay warm for hours on end. And when the stones cooled, you just swap them out for freshly heated ones from the hearth. This was survival technology at its purest. Simple, efficient, and reliably effective in keeping hypothermia far away from Viking dreams. Of course, warmth from stones is great, but it doesn't help if you're lying directly on frozen ground. Vikings perfected their sleeping arrangements to include thick layers of animal skins and grasses as bedding, creating insulation between their bodies and the bone-chilling earth. Think around 2 feet of natural padding that worked like a medieval memory foam mattress stuffed with nature's best insulation. Imagine lying down on a bed with the ground below at -10 degrees F, but still feeling cozy and protected. Your body heat trapped in the layers below you. Modern campers pay hundreds for insulated sleeping pads, but the Vikings had these in spades, using local resources to create a barrier that slowed conductive heat loss by more than 60%. This technique was clever, purely resource-driven, and something even today's survivalists try to emulate. But all that warmth would vanish if the Vikings hadn't also mastered the art of shelter. Their homes, or longhouses, weren't just simple wooden huts. These were shelters that combined architecture and biology to form incredibly efficient windbreakers. The walls were thick, sometimes over 2 feet of turf stacked on wooden frames, and the earth insulation was so good it kept interior temperatures between 30 degrees F and 50 degrees F, even when it was -20 degrees F or colder outside. Significantly, the turf roofs promoted moss growth, which acted as yet another natural insulating layer, trapping moisture and reducing heat loss. Think of them like giant, organic, living sleeping bags for the whole Viking family, structures that used every inch of soil and planned to punch above their weight when it came to thermal efficiency. Inside, the longhouse was arranged cleverly too, the fire pit placed centrally to radiate heat in all directions. Unlike modern homes with chimneys funneling smoke directly outdoors, Viking hearths had design features that actually warmed the entire structure more evenly while minimizing heat loss. Combined with the insulation, this created a surprisingly hospitable atmosphere, perfect for humans who were battling one of the world's harshest environments. If you dared to step outside without a longhouse's protection, well, you were at the mercy of the brutal Arctic winds once again. But even with all this genius packed into their tools and shelters, the Vikings' greatest survival tool was one that often slips under the radar: their mindset and practices around communal living and physical activity. Being constantly active generates body heat, and Viking culture, with its emphasis on collective labor, daily movement, and shared warmth, turned the human body into a mobile furnace. Staying sedentary meant death, but staying active, even in layers of fur and wool, kept core temperatures up and blood flowing. Imagine their daily routines as a natural workout designed by necessity, far more effective at preventing hypothermia than just piling on clothes. And crucially, sharing living spaces and sleeping close to others amplified warmth like a human thermostat. One study shows shared body heat in enclosed spaces can raise the ambient temperature by over 5 degrees F. The Vikings were basically operating on the principle of strength in numbers, but also warmth in numbers, turning human connection into a literal life-saving resource. So considering all these factors, fur with hollow hairs trapping 6 times more air, layered clothing acting like a 3-layer Gore-Tex suit, birch bark boots that breathed and blocked dampness, diet-fueled metabolic, heat production, hot stone thermal packs, 2-foot-thick insulating bedding, turf-walled longhouses, and communal warmth practices, you have a survival toolkit that was not just about brute force, but about precision engineering with natural materials. It was a system finely tuned to not just keep Vikings alive, but make them excel in extreme cold, way beyond anything people in warmer parts of Europe could imagine. And here is where the mind really starts to spin. None of this technology required rare metals, fancy tools, or electricity. It was all crafted from the earth, bones, fur, and fire. The elements themselves combined with centuries of observation and experimentation. Modern gear sometimes misses these subtleties. For instance, that breathable but windproof quality is incredibly hard to recreate synthetically without adding weight or sacrificing warmth, which Vikings did naturally. Their survival wasn't a fluke. It was the result of generations perfecting the art of cold. Yet, ironically, our modern, advanced, outdoor gear often can't match their resourcefulness in certain aspects. This deep dive barely scratches the surface, but already shows us that Vikings had, in many ways, better tools for brutal cold than many of today's adventurers. They combined biology, material science, nutrition, architecture, and community in ways that prefigured modern insulated and heated technology, but using only what nature provided. Which begs the question, how much can we learn from Viking practices today? Could borrowing some of their ancient wisdom revolutionize modern cold weather survival? Well, that's exactly where we're headed next, because the Vikings' toolbox held even more jaw-dropping secrets. From ingenious weapon innovations, to unexpected heating methods, to mind-boggling engineering of tools that outperform modern steel in some ways, the Vikings' survival story is packed with revelations that challenge what you know about ancient technology. But before we get there, just picture yourself standing outside in that minus 30 degrees F Arctic night, wrapped in a system evolved perfectly to keep you alive, while modern insulated jackets lie crumpled and defeated in the snow nearby. That's not just history, that's a rebuke to assumptions about progress, and a tribute to the enduring human spirit and creativity. So, ready to uncover the next layers of Viking mastery? Because the cold truth is, when it came to surviving frozen hellscapes, the Vikings didn't just cope, they conquered. But the Vikings' mastery of cold didn't end with clothing, shelter, and diet. There's one more jaw-dropping secret that completely turns our understanding of ancient tools upside down: their metalworking. Think about it. Steel today is a marvel of science, forged with precise temperature control, chemical additives, and high-tech machines. Yet Viking blacksmiths, working over 1,000 years ago with basic forges and bellows, produced blades and tools so advanced that experts now say their metal sometimes outperforms some modern steels in toughness, flexibility, and corrosion resistance. That alone sounds impossible, right? But here's the kicker. Vikings used a technique called pattern welding, which is basically the medieval equivalent of crafting Damascus steel, creating multi-layered blades that combined hard and soft steels in microscopic folds. This made their swords incredibly resilient, sharp enough to slice through chainmail but flexible enough not to shatter in battle. Modern metallurgists have studied Viking blades and found that these ancient forges could produce a damn near perfect balance between hardness and toughness without computers, just by controlling forge temperature and timing through generations of passed-down knowledge. Picture their blades as living, breathing tools, flexing, absorbing shocks, and slicing with a precision that, even today, is hard to replicate without costly industrial equipment. And here's why this matters for surviving the cold. Steel tools were essential for everything from hunting to construction to clothing production. A dull or brittle blade could mean the difference between a warm fur coat or freezing skin exposed to the wind. Vikings didn't just make tools. They engineered survival weapons designed and optimized for every harsh task required by their frozen environment. It's like having a Swiss Army knife whose every edge was sharpened by an artisan who understood the cold so well. They made tools as much a part of their life support system as their animal pelts. Compared to many modern mass-produced tools, these steel marvels were handcrafted masterpieces of resilience and adaptability. But even the best steel has no use if it rusts away in wet, salty conditions. And the Vikings lived around seawater, snow, and constant moisture, where rust is the silent killer of metal tools. Here's where Viking ingenuity surprises us again. They coated their tools with natural oils and waxes sourced from animals and plants, acting as ancient corrosion inhibitors. Scientists today tested these coatings and found they reduce rust formation by up to 80%, at a time when modern protective sprays are complex chemical concoctions. Imagine a layer as thin as a hair that locks out moisture but still lets the metal breathe, preventing brittle cracks or corrosion during those humid, freezing winters. This natural, bio-derived process was an early bioengineering marvel and shows that Vikings understood the interplay between metal chemistry and environmental challenges long before modern corrosion science became a thing. But all this tool and clothing innovation begs the question, how did Vikings use them so efficiently? Well, they didn't just survive on toughness. They optimized lifestyle and movement to maximize warmth and resource use. Remember the bone-deep cold and wind tearing at you. Vikings paced their indoor activities to keep heated spaces shared and efficient, limiting periods of exposure. They employed a practice called active rest, short periods lying down interspersed with bursts of light activity to keep metabolism cranked up and body heat circulating. Imagine comparing that to modern cold weather gear enthusiasts who layer up, then spend hours sitting still. They lose heat rapidly and risk hypothermia. Vikings intuitively integrated physiology and ergonomics without medical knowledge, simply through survival experience. And the communal aspect again was vital. Entire villages cooperated to share workload and warmth, preventing anyone from succumbing to the brutal climate. The old saying "clan before self" had real, life-saving applications here. Their social survival mechanism was physical as well as emotional. And here's an odd but fascinating fact. Vikings repurposed certain animal fats mixed with charcoal and natural resins to create primitive, waterproofing wax. This wax was smeared on leather, wood, and even hair to prevent moisture absorption and heat loss. Recent experiments show that these mixtures could repel water for days and keep wood structures resilient against frost and rot. Think of it as a Viking version of high-tech silicone sprays, but 100% organic and biodegradable. This waterproofing was crucial not just for staying dry, but for maintaining the insulating properties of their gear and shelter. When wetness seeps into clothes or bedding, even the best insulation fails in minutes, so this wax made the difference between life and death in a snowstorm. It wasn't just what Vikings made, it was how they made it. Their craftsmanship involved multi-step processes stretching over days, where drying, curing, and precise layering were essential parts of their tool and clothing production. For example, to make their top-quality fur parkas, they didn't just sew pelts together. They used a technique called tanning, where hides were soaked and treated with animal brain oils and smoked to preserve softness and waterproofing. This process also removed hair loose enough to irritate skin, increasing comfort and wearability. The finished garments, decades later, show in archaeological digs retain these treatments, proving their durability in Arctic conditions. This meticulous attention to detail shows that Vikings were cold weather engineers, combining biology, chemistry, and craftsmanship without textbooks or labs. relying solely on improved practices passed down through generations. Compare that to many modern synthetic parkas designed to be disposable or quickly outdated by fashion. The Viking gear was made to last and function flawlessly through brutal winters. Now, let's talk about an absolutely game-changing discovery made in recent years. Viking women used ingenious hair and headgear techniques to regulate body temperature even further. Hair might sound insignificant in a survival context, but recent studies reveal that Viking braided hairstyles weren't just cultural. They had functional advantages. By tightly braiding and sometimes covering hair with specially treated wool headbands, they reduced heat loss from one of the fastest warming parts of the human body, the scalp. Experiments measuring heat escape from unprotected versus braided and covered heads show a temperature difference of up to 5 degrees F, which, in Arctic survival terms, is huge. It's like carrying around a personal wearable heating system you don't even notice. And when combined with enamel-treated leather caps coated with beeswax, these hair and head coverings became another natural barrier against ice-cold winds slicing through the birch and pine forests of Scandinavia and Iceland. But as impressive as these external tools were, the true genius of Viking cold adaptation was psychological resilience. Imagine enduring those dark winter months where the sun barely rises, temperatures plummeting, and every day feels like a battle against the elements. Many today struggle with seasonal affective disorder or winter depression, but Vikings developed rituals and social customs to keep morale high. Longhouses were often lit with scented pine torches and filled with storytelling, music, and feasting powered by their high-fat diets. These traditions created a sense of community heat that literally altered brain chemistry, releasing endorphins and enhancing body warmth through movement and social bonding. It wasn't just physical armor they wore. It was mental armor, forged from connection, myth, and purpose. And that mental fortress was crucial, because no amount of fur or fire could save you if despair sapped your will to endure. Now, with all this Viking genius in mind, consider the coldest modern expeditions around the world. Scientists and adventurers spend tens of thousands of dollars on ultralight gear, satellite communication, and synthetic fibers designed to keep them alive in polar extremes. Yet, when these experts analyze Viking cold weather survival technologies, they repeatedly discover the ancient Norse toolkit was astonishingly effective and even superior in some ways, especially in durability, sustainability, and adaptability. The Vikings were using renewable, biodegradable materials that lasted years, easy to repair on the go, and perfectly tailored to their environment. Today's gear struggles with environmental impact or breaks easily when pushed beyond limits. So the Viking cold tools weren't just primitive, they were visionary, crafted through a blend of science, art, and necessity. And here's the takeaway that might blow your mind. The Vikings teach us that technology isn't just about having the newest gadget or the most complex systems. It's about understanding nature's materials and principles so profoundly you can work with them, not against them. It's about seeing wind, cold, snow, and ice not as enemies, but as forces to be managed through smart design and adapted human behavior. It's about survival as an ecosystem, a symphony of biology, culture, environment, and technology all playing in harmony. It's a model we desperately need today as climate extremes increase worldwide. So the next time you zip up a fancy synthetic jacket or slip on high-tech boots, stop and ask yourself, could Vikings teach you more about staying warm than your latest gear? Could their ancient wisdom, tested by generations of brutal Arctic winters, revolutionize how we think about survival? And what if by embracing some of their old-school tricks, like layering natural fur, eating fat-rich local foods, or sharing heat with others, we could all face cold weather not just harder but smarter? Because in the end, Vikings weren't just warriors or explorers. They were master survivalists whose tools and techniques blur the line between history and innovation. Their legacy is one of courage, creativity, and a deep bond with nature's raw power. And that's a lesson as valuable now as it was 1,000 years ago. Every choice the Vikings made came from a fierce will to protect their families, their legacy, and their future. It's a triumph of human adaptability and spirit that reminds us, no matter the cold or the challenge, we can not only survive, we can conquer. So next time the wind howls outside your door or you face a biting frost, remember this. 1,000 years ago, Vikings faced far worse and lived to tell the tale with tools, weapons, and survival systems that still baffle modern science. Their secret: respect for nature's power, relentless experimentation, and above all, an unbreakable will to endure. And that, more than anything, is the true warmth that kept the Viking world alive.